what's up, everybody? It's another edition of K and A. I'm Jeff Ketchum. That's Anwar Richardson. I'm the K part. He's the A part. And it is the Orange Bloods Texas Football Channel. This episode of K and A brought to you by MyPerfectFranchise.net. If you want to start living the dream, and I'm going to segue into our topic in just a second, and it will be perfect for Andy over at My Perfect Franchise, because if you want to change your life, if you want to start doing your own thing, running your own business, starting your own LLC, that's what he helps people do, gets them started so they can stop working for the man, start being the man, and start living the dream they want to live. Onward, today's topic is Tommy Brockermeyer in the portal. It happened. It's been talked about now. It feels like for over a year on orangebloods.com. The former five-star legacy who signed with Alabama, kind of helped put a death knell in Tom Herman's career when he was still in Austin. Now he's in the portal, and he needs to contact Andy over at MyPerfectFranchise.net to learn how to kind of figure out how to do his own thing, because that's where he is. In all seriousness, it's a really fascinating story that a player 2 years ago who was seen as he was Kelvin Banks before Kelvin Banks. Yeah. He goes to Alabama. Texas signs Kelvin Banks. Brockermeyer ends up being nothing like Kelvin Banks. And then the question that Texas fans, a lot of Texas fans have today, is should Tommy Brockermeyer be a player that the Longhorns go out and get in the portal, not necessarily as a guy that would come in and start right away because he's only played 2 games at Alabama in his career, but as a guy that provides depth and potentially competes for a starting spot and maybe in 2024 and 2025 is a guy that starts to live up to his pedigree to a certain extent. What was your initial impression when the word came out on Monday that Tommy Brockermeyer was actually in the portal? It's been discussed again for so long that when it actually happened, it was a little surreal.
Life comes at you fast. That's what my thought was. Like, and it's just amazing to me when you talk about, the death nails, like in the Quinn Ewers death nail, the Brockermeyer death nail. And like, here we are a couple of years later, Quinn came home. Maybe there's a Brockermeyer thing, and it's interesting because what was viewed as 2 major losses, at the time, a couple of years later, people are like, okay, well, let's see what we can make of it, right? So that was like kind of my initial thought. You're right that even going into this year, that had been kind of a topic, it was like what's going to happen, with the Brockermeyer twins, and obviously Tommy is the first one to bolt. Because his brother, obviously James, has not entered the portal as of this recording. So it becomes an interesting conversation because, Ketch, there was a time that you needed a guy like James Brockermeyer. Like, you needed him because offensive line recruiting was so bad. Like, it was tragic under Herb Hand. And now you're at the point they've recruited so well that it's not a need. It's something that you can, because now beforehand, Catch, we would have said that guy comes in, he starts right away. Catch, now you'd say when he comes in, he may have to sit behind some guys who have done some things. That's the interesting thing, that it's not even a need at that point. So first of all, props to Sarkisian, props to Flood for what they've been doing from a recruiting standpoint. And they really have to decide, like, do we need them or do we want them?
Well, I think there's a really interesting conversation, which is one of the things that we're having right now about this situation. I think Texas needs to bring in a right tackle. When you look at what they did this past year, Christian Jones, I think it gets lost. That dude played more snaps, I think, than anybody on the team this year. 771 snaps. Kind of incredible when you think about it. Like, I don't think anybody on the defense broke 700. Every offensive lineman that was a starter for the Longhorns did break 700. Kelvin Banks, 751. Hayden Connors, 744. Jake Majors, 754. Cole Hudson, 705. So you're looking to replace 771 Christian Jones snaps, a guy that was, I think, a pretty good player this year. the guy that at this point is scheduled to be the guy at right tackle, kind of by default right now, is Cam Williams, who played 24 snaps this year along the offensive line. Now, I think he played double-digit games or close. So he was involved in special teams, and he will be a true sophomore next year on the scholarship board. But I think they need to bring a right tackle in to compete with Cam Williams for that job. Most people have been wondering, do you bring in a guy with experience? Do you go out to Stanford and see if you can poach their right tackle who has started 30-plus games and is a former 5-star, and you come in, you bring that guy in for a year, and you let Cam Williams grow up a little bit more? This is a different alternative. I think if you bring Brockermeyer in, he competes with Cam Williams for the job probably right away, but I think Cam Williams is probably the projection to win that job going in, and Brockermeyer would really have to take it away from him. Whereas if they bring in a guy with experience, I think it shifts a little bit. I think if you're bringing in a guy that's a proven starter at the major college level and he's a one-year stopgap for you, then I think that guy becomes the projected starter, and Cam Williams has to take the job away from him. So it really comes down to what does Kyle Flood prefer? Does he prefer a guy that makes next year's line absolutely better, or does he want to bring in a guy who maybe long-term wise elevates the position by hitting, his potential? It can't get lost that Kyle Flood is the guy that was really responsible for landing Tommy Brockermeyer at Alabama. Mm-hmm. So there is a relationship there. He's the guy that wanted Tommy in the beginning. Do you go get that guy, or do you need to look for somebody better?
It's a great thing, because basically you're talking about, Cam versus, Tommy at that point. And first of all, we're operating in this conversation without knowing what Christian Jones is going to do, because if Christian Jones comes back, that's probably your starter. Then you still got Cam Williams, right? And then the Brockermeyer, like where does he?
You might not need a tackle at that point.
No, so if you're Sarkisian, you probably need to have a conversation with Christian this week and say, hey man, where are you leaning? It would help us to in the future. We're trying to figure out, you kind of nudge him just a little bit to know about that. But if Christian Jones decides, okay, I want to go pro, and that's kind of the idea, then like you said, then there becomes a spot, and it's interesting because again, I feel like. I feel like I've become some Kyle Flood fanboy of some sort, but I think this dude is really good. And what he was able to do from a production standpoint from Kelvin Banks and Cole Hudson, and have those guys be able to compete and because Banks is one of the better looking freshmen you probably have ever seen on the offensive line, correct?
He's the best.
The best. Okay.
He's the best.
Cole Hudson, for whatever it's worth for you, you would say, I'm not from a ranking standpoint, but you would feel like he did pretty good this season, correct?
I thought he was barely average.
Okay, all right. So, barely average. Okay, well, that's a video.
He was the worst player on the line, which as a true freshman that probably shouldn't. It was only starting because there was no one else. I think context matters. Do I think he had a good freshman season? Yes. Do I think he's a plus offensive lineman on a really good college offensive line? No, he's not there yet, but he's a baby. Like, my expectations for Cole Hudson is that by the time he's a junior, he will be the player that he just couldn't be as a true freshman. And I don't think it's not like he failed in any way. I think he did everything that he could. Texas just didn't have better options this year. If they'd had a Christian Jones kind of older interior player to play that spot, they would have. And it could have been Junior Angelau, right? If Junior stays healthy, there's a very good chance that Hayden Connor is the guard on the other side. And then Cole Hudson doesn't play as much football this year as he does. But the Angelau injury meant that they had to play two new guards, and it was the thing that really forced Hudson. So while they didn't have any injuries during the season, the Angelau injury in the preseason had a real impact, because Angelau's a solid player. I don't know that I would say he's a very good player, but I think he's a pretty good player. And he would have been better this year on the offensive line than Hudson in true freshman form.
So yeah, okay, it's still what you're going to say. It kind of falls in line to what my thought process was, right? Which is, at the end of the day, we know Kyle Flood has done a good job as far as putting talent out there and trying to develop them to young guys. And they, like you said, good season, maybe not a great season for Hudson, excellent season for Kelvin Banks. So you got to think to yourself, okay, that's probably what's going on with Cam Williams at this point as far as development is concerned. They've invested a lot of time in him. There's probably wherever his ranking is, it's good enough to have him played in every single game, 24 snaps. And so he's probably projecting to the point where you can tell yourself, okay, he should be there by next season. Then you have to ask yourself, where is Brockermeyer? Now, to your point, look, you can't have enough depth on an offensive line. You can't have enough of those good guys that are there. And if you can find, good quality depth on the offensive line, then by all stretch of the imagination, go to Tommy Brockermeyer. Now, he may be at a position where he says, all right, I've sat for, a couple of years. I need a guarantee on the box. And that would be well within his right. I don't want to come in here and have to quote unquote compete. I'm looking here. You got Christian, you've got Cam. And it's not that I'm scared of competition, but sometimes, Catch, you can look and you say, I know for sure this checks the box. I know this is my position. So it'd be interesting to see what he's looking for. And does he want to just come home to be at Texas and compete? Or is he just looking for a guarantee that says, look, for the next couple of years, you are our guy, 3 years or whatever that case may be, 2 years, whatever. That will be very interesting in the whole conversation.
Yeah, I think there's a world out there where Texas decides, you know what, we want Tommy Brockermeyer. So they go back and they officially offer him. And Brockermeyer might look at that and say, I don't know that Texas is the best place for me, because he might be a guy that still needs another year of development. One of the things that set him back was he had a back injury in high school that carried over to college. So he's still, I think, trying to get back to the place that he was physically, and that impacts your weightlifting, your off season, all of those things, your core strength. If he comes to Texas, I said this last night on the OB After Hours show, because I was on the air when he hit the portal. If he comes to Texas and on day one, he's on the third team scout team, that's a story. Whereas if he goes to an SMU or a TCU and he's third team on day one, ain't nobody really paying attention. Mm-hmm. And it might be that for what it is that he needs, a little bit lower pressure situation where if he doesn't start this year, but starts in 2024 and 2025, and that's seen as a success, that might be a better landing spot for him, as opposed to you come to Texas, and then I'm telling you right now, one of the top 3 questions in spring football and all the way through August, all the way into the season, will be, how's Tommy Brockermeyer? Where's he at on the depth chart? Is he making a move? Is he going to win the battle with Cam Williams? And if he doesn't, there's almost a referendum in terms of, did you make the right decision? Did he might make the right decision? There's a lot more pressure, I think, in transferring to Texas than there is almost anywhere else for Tommy Brockermeyer. And they've got to get this one right. When he picked Alabama, he did so always knowing that the portal would be a place that was his get out of jail card. He just used it. You don't get to transfer again unless you're a grad transfer without a penalty. And, I don't know where he is academically, but he's just finished his second year in college. He probably needs a couple of years before he gets that degree and is officially done. So I think making a shrewd decision is more important than making, I don't know how you would classify Texas, but it's a bit emotional, right? It's where his parents went. It's where he thought for most of his life he would play. He may have that opportunity again, because I think Texas probably will offer him. The question will be for me, and I think for everybody in this situation, is it where he needs to be? And I personally don't have a good answer for that. I mean, you and I have debated Hudson Card and what he should do and the tiers of offers that he should look at. I think that a little bit like Hudson Card, he's got to make sure he makes the right decision. I think Brockermeyer's in a similar spot. The right decision for him might not look like the right decision on paper in the way that we typically talk about these things, right? Where it's like, go to the best school possible, go to the team that's going to win the most possible. Sometimes the best decision is to go to a place that's going to allow you to be the best version of yourself. I don't know for certain where I think that is.
Yeah, and it's tough because now with hindsight being what it is, right? In hindsight, he probably should have just went to Texas in the first place and just called it a day, right? Because he would have been able to go to the school that he loved, this carry on the family legacy that they had, and he probably plays right away, right? The things that he didn't like about Alabama, it wouldn't even mattered at that point because he's here, he's playing, he's at the school that he loves. It's all good, but he kind of for whatever reasons they decide to go to Alabama, and then the things that they committed to, Kyle Flood, Steve Sarkisian, things change. He gets injured, and I think there was something in there too. Catch, I thought was like Saban questioning his injury at one point, like before the season. I remember reading something, don't quote me on it, but there was a little bit of a brouhaha. There was a little, you could tell that something was up in the water when with the whole injury thing. Or I think I was hearing that he wasn't acknowledging. I think that was the issue. I think I've heard, if I remember correctly, that Saban wasn't acknowledging enough how injured he was. And that was something that was bothering, maybe potentially bothering the family. Don't sue me. This is just going off the top of my head, off of whatever you remember. And so you point out, you can't get it wrong. Like you have to get this right. And that's why, for me, a lot of times, Catch, when I say, it's better not, to go to the SMUs of the world, there's no disrespect to SMU, because I'm like, you'll play there. And you're guaranteed, for sure, you're the big man on campus. Scouts are everywhere, so you don't have to worry about, am I going to get seen? Like, you're good enough, scouts will find you, and you're good. Like, but when you go into this, kind of go back into the world of, here's another 5-star, here's another 4-star, here's another high 4-star, all this kind of stuff. Like, now you've got to do it once again, and your margin of error is pretty slim. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see, what, Sarkisian and the staff does. What do they tell him, Catch? What do they tell him about what's potentially available here? Because the pitch can't just be come here and compete. It's got to be more than that. I think
you tell him that you could look. Here's the rosiest picture for Brockermeyer at Texas. Come to Texas, compete with Cam Williams to be the right tackle, and then in 2 years, Kelvin Banks is out of here. And your senior year will flip you to left tackle and get you ready for the NFL. So come in 2 years at right tackle, have some success there. And the moment that Kelvin Banks is gone after the 2024 season, you come in your last season and you get, the awards circuit deal. You're our guy. You'll be the next great player. I mean, I think the thing that you look at that I think would be appealing is that Texas they got 4 or 5 guys that they feel good about, but they got nobody after that. They got 4 starters coming back, but their depth last year was either crap or it was just really young. Mm-hmm. And so young that none of those guys have a real advantage over Tommy Brockermeyer at this point. So, I think it's an easy sell. I think there's just a little bit more risk. I think the team to watch out for along with Texas is TCU, because Blake Brockermeyer, his dad, has a relationship with Sonny Dykes when he was at SMU. And so you'll have a situation where I think TCU will look real attractive. I mean, you and I have been talking about TCU's sudden shininess in the world of college football. They will be able to tell him, we were competing for a national championship this year. We're in the playoff. We'll lose some guys this year. You can come in for us. Less pressure, more comfort, and at the very least be competing on the level that Texas is.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hell of a sell. I mean, and the thing is that, we haven't talked, but, TCU's competing for a natty. Like that's sexy. I'm sorry. Like this is not the TCU of old where you're just, you shoulder shrug it. It's not well, if you don't have a lot of options, maybe you can go to TCU and see what that looks like. No, like TCU should be able to, if they're able to build off of this, be able to, not only recruit the state of Texas, but recruit nationally, going
That'll
forward.
never happen.
Well, I'm saying they should be able to. I said should be able to.
I mean, college football is a weird place. Texas shouldn't be able, after all these years, to still be kind of, along with Texas A&M, first foot in the door with regards to the best high school football players in the state, right? I mean, Baylor's won championships when Texas hasn't. Now TCU's done it as well. I mean, Texas hasn't been closing the deal in terms of winning rings, and yet, they'll still be the in-state school along with Texas A&M, and TCU will never get over that hump. Now, I think you're right. They should be able to make the case that they should be in those conversations, and yet my own personal expectations is that they will always be a middle-class program with regards to high school football recruiting in the state of Texas. But TCU could be a much more attractive portal destination for college players than they are for high school players. Sure, because college players will be much more about, I just want to handle that business, and this is a winning program, versus some of the shiny things that the bigger schools offer in recruiting, that once guys get on campus, they realize, oh, well, it's not, that mattered a lot to me when I was 17. But now that I'm 20, I have different priorities.
100%. Winning and trying to get to the NFL and we're playing, like, all those things matter a lot more than the recruiting pitches. That's the thing. Like, these guys in the portal, they've heard the pitch before, and it didn't work out, right? So they already come in with a little bit of, head on the swivel, keep looking around, because they're like, I got sold a bill of goods last time. You guys ain't going to do that to me again, right? So they're going to come in here, be a little bit smarter, a little bit wiser, to your point, a little bit older. Yeah, and it'll be fascinating to catch. I know we'll wrap up, but it'll be fascinating to see what the Brockermeyers do. So yes or no on your end, if you're Texas, you offer Tommy Brockermeyer?
Yes, because I think he's better than any offensive lineman they're going to sign in this recruiting class in 2023. Signing day just a couple of weeks away, 2 weeks and a day from tomorrow. And I think he's better than by far, from an upside standpoint, better than anybody that they will sign this year in recruiting. And I think absolutely I think on paper he makes your depth immediately better. I mean, a guy like Logan Parr just left the program and really wasn't ever going to be a contributor. Adding a guy like Tommy Brockermeyer, even the guy that failed at Alabama, he's got 3 years of eligibility left, and you can see a world where he eventually is an important cog in the offensive line machine. I don't feel that way about everybody that they've recruited this year. So in an offensive line, in a program where you're going to have like 15 offensive linemen in your program, I think he would be somewhere in the middle, but nowhere near towards the back. So for those reasons, I would say yes. What about you?
Yeah, I would say yes. You just can't turn down good offensive linemen. Like, if you have the opportunity to get them, and like to your point, what you just said about injuries, if something like that happens, you've got to be able to have guys that are plug in. And so, at the end of the day, like, there's certain positions, like, receivers, they're a dime a dozen as far as finding good, fast receivers. Like, those guys are out there. DBs are out there. Like, those, you can find those. But it's hard to find, good linebackers. It's hard to find good defensive linemen, right? It's especially interior guys, and it's hard to find good athletic offensive linemen. So if you can find one of them and he's willing to come to your program, I think you just stack the room and then you just let it sort itself out from there.
Yeah, and my last thought on this would simply be, he failed at Alabama because he couldn't get on the field by the end of his redshirt freshman season. We need some context here. It's not like he was there for 5 years and couldn't get on the field. Most offensive linemen, they say they need 3 years in a strength and conditioning program before you would expect to start to see their best football. It's what I just said of Cole Hudson, except that he was forced to play this season. In a weird way, Tommy Brockermeyer is being judged because of his recruiting ranking more so than the normal expectations that we typically judge all offensive linemen. So, just keep that in mind with Brockermeyer. He was a bust at Alabama because he couldn't get on the field immediately, basically because he wasn't Kelvin Banks.
Yeah.
But those guys grow on trees even at a lesser rate than good players in the portal. So, yeah, I think if it were me, I would take what's the downside? He doesn't pan out, and you go out and you find the next guy. So it's not as desperate as it was. So you take him because you can, not because you need him so bad that if you don't get him, you lose your job. It's a different place in Austin, Texas on the offensive line in 2022 than it was in 2020. Anwar and I, though, want to know your thoughts. If you're Kyle Flood and you're Steve Sarkisian, tell us in the comments section, what do you do? Do you go after Tommy Brockermeyer? And if you're Tommy Brockermeyer and you were forced with a Texas TCU decision, which do you think's the better landing spot for Tommy Brockermeyer, given the fact Kelvin Banks ain't going anywhere for a while? So, which is a great problem to have if you're Texas. It's like the best thing. If you could have 2 more years of Bijan or 2 more years of Kelvin Banks, it's pretty easy who you would take.
Yeah, Banks. give me the future first round left tackle over the future running back. I might find a good running back. I don't know if I'm going to find an excellent left tackle.
You know what? But we just sounded out why I think you take Brockermeyer, because if you do hit on him, you really have something of value that almost no other than quarterback and edge rusher. There's nobody else on the field that has more value if that guy does turn out and hit with a little bit more time. Do us a solid. Like this video. Hit that thumbs up button if you've liked this discussion at all. If we've informed you at all. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done that. Get notifications. Go check out myperfectfranchise.net. Contact Andy if you want to start living the dream and owning and running your own business, your own LLC, your own future. But for now, K&A will bid you farewell. We'll talk to you tomorrow, I'm sure. Yeah, Wednesday will be Drunk Uncle Day. So we'll just keep piling on the content throughout the week. Until next time, you guys take care.